I have been busy milling up some maple that fell on the property. Got a lot more to go in a hurry because we're moving. And I've only got a chainsaw mill to run it. So, making the first registration cut's always probably the most important cut that you make, because it sets up everything else for all of the other cuts down the log. So, big frustration, you run a cut, you get down to the pith, and you go right through the middle of it. So you screw up two boards. You end up having the pith on bottom side of one board, top side of the other board, vice versa. Either way, you're going to have two boards that really go nuts when they start drying, and checking starts taking place. So in order to salvage that, you want to try and center the pith on a single cut board. And I've got a fairly simple way that I've come up with doing that. And I know there's probably 1,000 different ways to do it, but this is the way it comes easy to me. And it's fairly simple, it's fairly straightforward. The only things you need, first off, is a log. Yeah, we've all got those, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Drill motor, some screws, a couple of zip ties, hammer. I like to use a combination square. Tape measure is fine. A couple of registration boards. I've got a couple of center support blocks that I use in my milling process. More zip ties, dikes to trim the zip ties, and a level of some sort. You can use the one that's on the combination square, but it gets a little tippy. The larger level is kind of nice for setting on the registration boards, but if you're doing this out in the woods and you've got a tote that you carry around, and you're like me and have backed over a cheap level and busted it, you can trim that off, and boom, now you've got a little portable level that you can throw on the registration boards when you're setting everything First thing I do, I try and approximate the center of the pith. Drive a nail in. Do that to both ends. And then grab a measuring tape. Get an idea of the diameter of where you're looking. So this one's roughly 7.5. The bark maybe 8. Come down here, check this one out. That one's 6.5. So simple math, 6.5, 7.5. That's a difference of 1. The registration board on this end is going to be 1 inch higher than the registration board at that end. Okay, so now that we got measurements out of the way, I take a registration board, put the top center screw in. I hold it in with 3 screws, 1 top center, 1 low on the outsides. I'm only putting the first one in so that we can make adjustments as we go, and let's see if we can do this with one hand. So basically you want to try and find the top of the log where you're not going to be sticking above the log and letting the log position your registration ladder or board for you. This is a 3-handed process, and I've only got 2 hands. I ran that screw, but your registration board's still flopping around. So now what I'll do, put the level on there, try and find a level position. Doesn't matter if the log's level end to end or not. You're just trying to square the ends up the best you can. So let's see if I can do this. Let me get fancy here. Hopefully this shows up. But go through and get that level. Run this screw tight. Now, with that tight, we can be as anal as we want about getting it perfectly level. I like to have the bubble touching one side because it's an easy registration. You don't have to guess to see where you're at in between the lines with the bubble. And then just it's a matter of running the other 2 screws. Set this down, and we got this board attached, rock solid. This is where I like to use the combination square. Allows me to go through the index right off of that board. Actual depth, yeah, it's close to level. Just tighten that down. Now, this is my gauge for the other end. So when I go to the other end and repeat the process, I can set this on the board and make sure that it touches the nail on the opposite side. That ensures that I've got the 1-inch rise that I need to compensate for the smaller diameter down at the other end. Take my registration board and I set it right there, and I just bring this down until it hits the nail. I can try and level it out a little bit, having the bubble level there. And now this is when it gets tricky and I need a 4th hand, so I'm going to go ahead and pause again. Be right back. Got that top center attached. We're still wiggly, which is good. Now, we can go to level. It looks like we're level because the bubble's touching the right, but it was touching the right on the other side. So we want to make sure it's touching the left on this side, so that the ends transfer down. Grab the screw gun, bump my level. Let's make sure I didn't bump my registration, which I did. So, there we go. And again, be as anal as you want. Now, get that started. Drive that down in. And we have some wiggle with these screws rolling in, and I am missing that one by a ton. So I'm going to have to put an extra hole here so I can get to the meat of the log. Right, we got that last screw run. It's in the meat. Let's make sure where we're at on the level. Hey, that looks good. Let's go down to the other end. Make sure we're still good down there. We are still good down there. Now, what we want to do is we want to lay the ladder across the ends of these registration boards. And I found a fancy way to secure these is with zip ties. A lot of people go, ooh, that's not secure, that should be put down. I've done this a number of times and it actually works quite well. You have a notch down here in the bottom of your registrations where the zip ties actually embed themselves down in there. And how you position the zip ties to the ladder will help to determine how secure the ladder is. Ladder. All right, now, told you positioning the ladder is a little bit crucial on this. So what we want to do is we want to look at the registration and where this leg lies. Now I can put it straight over the top like this, and go down to the other end. You'll notice there's a nice gap in there. That's what you want to try and balance out. Reason being, so when we put the zip ties on there, we want the zip ties on this side pulling it that way, and the zip ties on that end pulling it this way. Those opposing forces will hold it in place a lot better. All right, zip ties loosely on, loosely on. Curve cuts in the bottom of those indexes. That just hides your zip tie from your first cut on the chainsaw. That way you don't nick it and blow the whole setup right out of the water. Again, down on this side, everything's still loose. This is where it gets crucial, tightening it. So you want to slowly snug this down so that it gets tight without pulling your index ladder. Get that one tightened down. All right, so everybody's pulled back this way. That's good. Now on this end, it's going to want to pull as well. These you can crank right down. That's, you get a little bit of shift because we're not done yet. Still got some tightening to do. Shift that up. Keep making sure these zip ties are good and tight. No, that's not a German word, but it would be really cool if it were. See if we can get another click or two. And now we do have a little bit of lateral. And it's not because it's a ladder. Sorry. But end to end, you're solid. I mean, that's not going anywhere. It might shift just a touch, but it's not going to blow out. Hey, look at that. Half zoom. Hey, that's a better view. All right, now another thing I like to use. See if I can slide that over a little bit more. Couple of support blocks. So we've got what? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, makes sense. It's a 9-foot log dummy. So somewhere around 4 or 5. See where they fit most snug. Put a couple of center support blocks that will help keep this lifted off the log as your cut's coming down this way, because the ladder will want to try and flex downward, even a good ladder. And again, little holes go right in the side. You guessed it, the other 2 zip ties. Simple little fix, just gives a little extra added support in the center. Got the zip ties on. Not worried about the height of the zip ties, since there's, you know, about a 1/2 inch gap between the ladder itself and the zip tie. And truthfully, I like this over using screws down into the wood piece, because if you miscalculate and you run a brand new blade right through a nice brand new wood screw might die, but not without doing some damage first. And there you have it. There's my setup. That's how I like to do it. Things are nice and level. It's a beautiful thing. It's ready for a saw. Last tip to complete this setup: make sure you take that pith nail out of there. You don't want to hit that with the chainsaw either. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. Hope this helps.